everyone to the episode of HCL Predictions panel series, iPredict. The iPredict conversation series presents an intuitive insight from industry leaders in life sciences and healthcare domain, enabling thought-provoking perspectives and outcomes as building blocks to a better equipped tomorrow. We all agree to the fact that the role of today's leaders is very dynamic, and it would be interesting to hear how they're preparing to address the challenges of the future. So, we have an interesting session planned today featuring experts who have come together as advisors for the theme Digital Therapeutics and its eminence in mental health. Now, I welcome them. Ansley Hatch is the head of digital health research at Otsuka Pharmaceutical Development and Commercialization. In this role, she leads the research activities for Otsuka Digital Solutions. Candice Salterini is a senior director for applied innovation and process improvement at Otsuka Pharmaceutical Development and Commercialization. Candice's focus is to deliver impactful advances in the science and operations of clinical research and development. Austin Spear is a Chief Strategy Officer at Click Therapeutics, where he works to align product development, go-to-market, and regulatory strategy for Click's pipeline of digital therapeutics. He brings to Click over 10 years of strategic consulting and FDA regulatory experience. Shaheen Lakhan is a physician scientist with over 15 years of experience in healthcare, academia, and industry focusing on neuroscience research and development. As an expert in patient empowering clinical development from drugs to devices, Dr. Lakhan is keen on transforming medicine and democratizing healthcare through digital therapeutics at Click. The conversation will be steered by Anil Tikku, Vice President in Life Sciences and Healthcare at HCL Technologies. Thank you all for joining us today. Over to you, Anil.
Thank you, Ishita. Indeed, we have the esteemed panel today, and we have a very interesting prediction for today. Digital therapeutics is the future of solving complex medical problems like mental health. So let's dive right in. Mental health has been a serious issue for quite some time now, and I know Otsuka has been at the forefront of solving the mental health issues. However, with COVID-19 pandemic, we're already seeing a significant increase in cases of depression and overall mental health. So, as a company with a long history of developing treatments in mental health space, what is Otsuka doing to help patients in mental health with mental health and well-being issues?
So at Otsuka, our mission is to develop treatments for better health worldwide. We're very focused in particular on areas of unmet need, such as mental illness. My background as a psychiatrist, I'm super excited that we are committed to developing solutions for mental illness and diseases of the central nervous system overall, and that we've persevered in this despite a large industry exodus from this area for many years. At Otsuka, we look to help break down what we see as three major barriers in mental health care. First, getting a diagnosis or a proper diagnosis. Stigma for seeking care is still a factor here. Miss or underdiagnosis when first seeking care is also not uncommon. Second, getting consistent treatment once diagnosed. We know that once diagnosed properly, there are barriers to getting treatment on a routine basis due to access issues that include geography, lack of providers, and cost. Third, limited options in treatment. One size does not fit all here. What works for one person with depression does not necessarily work for another person with depression. And what works for one episode may not work for the next, even for the same person. There is a lot we're still learning about the best ways to treat mental illness overall.
And Candice, further to that, I think we have let's not forget the issue of the pandemic and the context we're in now. There's much data suggesting rising rates of mental health problems, and now there's never been a greater time to think about new and innovative approaches. And Otsuka is one of the few pharmaceutical companies that is in the pharmaceutical business, so tablets and long-acting injectables, but also digital medicine and digital therapeutics. And that is because we envision a future that leverages the broad capabilities of technology, that we think can absolutely advance health and wellness. And digital therapeutics, which is what we're here to talk about today, is one of those examples for sure.
Thank you, Ansley. And it's interesting. Digital therapeutics is becoming a major healthcare pathway. But for the larger audience, Austin, I'll come to you. What is digital therapeutics?
Yeah, thanks, Anil. It's really a great question and one we get often. As you know, digital health is a growing and complex field, and it can often be challenging to decipher what's what within it. It's easiest to think of digital therapeutics as an emerging category within digital health. Digital therapeutics are unique within digital health because they are prescription software applications, such as a mobile app on your smartphone, where the software itself is the treatment. In other words, the software is delivering meaningful clinical outcomes independent of or in addition to any other kind of therapy. And its ability to deliver that treatment, this is important, is that it's validated in clinical trials, the same as any other medical product, like a pharmaceutical or a medical device. And similar to those medical products, you need a prescription from your prescriber in order to be able to access a digital therapeutic. So at simplest, in many ways, you can think of a digital therapeutic as the digital equivalent of a medication. So similar to a pill your physician might prescribe, except for in this case, it's software. In contrast, for digital health, applications are more similar to a nutritional supplement, such as vitamin C. So something that you might go to the drugstore yourself and buy over the counter to help support like your overall well-being, but they aren't really meant to treat disease. So in that regard, digital therapeutics are different from digital health in a way that makes them really a meaningful new treatment category, important for both patients and providers. That's what I think is exciting about this new treatment type, is that it can also address many of the unmet medical needs that are poorly or not even treated by current options, which is one of the great promises of digital therapeutics.
Great. Thank you for explaining that. So how is digital therapeutics actually addressing the unmet medical needs?
Anil, that's a fantastic question. In fact, that's probably why we're all here, to address unmet medical needs. You know, I've fortunately lived through this from a variety of roles addressing unmet medical needs. As a full-time practicing neurologist and pain physician, you know, frankly, I was mired by all of that red tape that I knew wasn't achieving any better outcomes or patient quality of life. As a caregiver to a family member who suffers from serious mental illness, you know, I experienced the negative cost of being a caregiver that could lead to emotional and physical exhaustion. As a therapeutics developer now, I design, build, and validate these solutions to really meet the needs of sometimes disparate stakeholders. And lastly, we're all in this, you know, as patients or consumers of healthcare. You know, we succumb to a system of care that's more centered around the institutions that deliver it than our individual health and well-being. You know, unfortunately, these medical needs have been pretty much further amplified when it comes to mental health. You know, just as Ainsley said, we all know there's a massive shortage of mental health professionals, from counselors, psych NPs, psychologists, psychiatrists. You know, all the while the prevalence and incidence rates of mental health diseases are rising and only worsened by the pandemic. Digital therapeutics are perfectly slated to alleviate those pain points that fellow clinicians like I have experienced, to ease that burden of caregivers and loved ones, and bridge that divide between highly controlled studies and the real world environment, which we all live in, right? And most importantly, offer accessible, engaging, safe, and effective solutions, often in ways that drugs simply can't, for people living with mental illness.
Yeah, no, thanks. And I agree with you completely. Given the challenges that we're having as a result of pandemic, I think the need is here and now. So Ansley, I wanted to ask you, how is Otsuka leveraging digital therapeutics to address the needs of both the patients and the providers?
Yes, Anil, you'll hear from us today this issue around access, right? It's a barrier. Shaheen just mentioned that. And other than the shortage of mental health professionals and the geographic distribution not being even, you've got other barriers to getting care. It takes time to make appointments. You often have referrals and there's wait lists. Patients may not want to do what the clinician's recommending. They may have a preference for something else. And then, of course, there's stigmatization. So this big bucket of access to care is a huge unmet need. The other thing we face in psychiatry is that even when the treatments are given, unfortunately, often there's a suboptimal response with the treatments. And so the digital therapeutic offering is really helping not only with providing some kind of treatment that can meet patients where they are conveniently and provide that treatment to break through some of those barriers that I've mentioned, but it's also an additive treatment on top of standard of care that can move the needle and move that needle on suboptimal response towards wellness.
And if I may just add here that even though we've been talking about digital therapeutics as a ways to address unmet needs of patients, we've long been thinking about leveraging technology as a way to increase flexibility and decrease friction in the healthcare access process. We want to build on the groundswell of interest, frankly, that's been happening in the pandemic era to digitize healthcare and processes, including that of clinical research. And so through our work with folks like Verily, we're focused on leveraging technology to democratize clinical research itself so that we can bring these new therapies to those in need sooner, faster. Through our collaborations, we're identifying new and better ways to engage more patients and clinicians in research, to include diverse populations of patients and clinicians, and to increase the speed and ease of conducting these kinds of studies and collecting more comprehensive, high-quality data within traditional brick-and-mortar clinics and the non-traditional virtual or decentralized research sites as well.
That's interesting, and thank you for doing all the great work, Candice and the Otsuka team. Let me dive into another related topic. Digital therapeutics is a new concept. I know FDA is coming up to speed. Patients and providers, they are trying to understand how this will work in conjunction with the traditional therapeutics that they've been having. So, Austin, can you tell us how has the journey been so far?
Yeah, it's a good point, Anil. This is a new treatment category, and it has taken time and effort to get where we are today. As I mentioned earlier, a key differentiator for DTX is that they're evidence-based. And I think as Candice just highlighted, generating that evidence through novel techniques has also been an important part of that journey so far. But ultimately, what matters is the audience for that evidence, and there are multiple key stakeholders along this journey, including, importantly, I think you mentioned one, FDA and other health authorities, because medicine is a highly regulated field. And ensuring that our relationship with regulators and payers is a positive one, where they understand the value of DTX, understand that it's something different from digital health in general, has been a key part of the journey so far. I'd say that, in fact, in the US, FDA has been a really good partner in that process. They've really done a lot to help establish digital therapeutics as a new treatment category. If you think about it, the agency has a mission to both protect and improve the public health. And they see how digital therapeutics can really address that through targeting unmet medical needs, and do so in a particularly safe way because there's no side effects like there are with a traditional drug, or very limited side effects compared to a traditional drug or medical device. So in that regard, FDA is really incentivized to see this category succeed. They get it. So to that end, they've established a digital health center of excellence. They've started issuing different policies and programs to help sponsors of these new products understand the regulatory landscape, to really start to facilitate dialogue around some of the more complex issues like artificial intelligence and machine learning. But on the other hand, that also doesn't mean that they are just giving these new products a free pass either. So FDA is also continuing to set a really high clinical evidence standard for these medical products, even when they are digital software-only products. So they require developers of digital therapeutics, the same as they would of any medical device, to supply sufficient evidence of safety and effectiveness to support treatment claims. And that's key because it really helps establish digital therapeutics as evidence-based and establishes an evidentiary standard for being able to claim to be a digital therapeutic versus being a general wellness or health application. In other words, you have to validate your product does what you say it does in a well-designed clinical study to be able to be a digital therapeutic. In addition to FDA, we've worked with a variety of other stakeholders to really help them understand the unique value that DTX can bring. We're excited to continue to see that progress. I think a lot of that progress has been in part due to the pandemic, which is bittersweet to see, but something that we're working through with all the various stakeholders to help them understand how they can integrate digital into their practices. I think that's something that my colleague Shaheen can actually speak a bit more to in terms of how that might work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Austin. I definitely agree. So digital therapeutics are expanding the capabilities of modern medicine, and frankly, will reach new heights, not just managing diseases, but even preventing them down the road. We at Click have this unique model where as opposed to just building solutions and then testing them out in the stakeholders, payers, do you have interest in this? Providers, would you prescribe this? Patients, would you actually use this to get better health outcomes? We have a co-design principle and co-development principle. That means early on from conception to user research and integrations into workflows across the stakeholders, we get them involved, ask them questions, iterate on that process. And this way we could account for that entire ecosystem that we know is fragmented, so the patient's not faced with roadblocks down the line. Throughout our active listening efforts, we've also heard from individuals with lived experience with mental illnesses. They, just like we, want FDA-approved therapies. We want therapies that are trusted and prescribed by our physicians, that work in tandem with our existing treatments. And we want therapies on demand, where and when we want to use it, especially in the greatest moments of need. For providers, there are organizations like the American Medical Association or the AMA that's working to address three critical issues. One, defining a rule block on, does the DTX work? Will I receive payment or reimbursements for these solutions? And will it work in my practice setting, in my environment? So the APA makes a tremendous amount of advances in this front, given the evolving digital health technologies that are out there. And if I just take a snippet of what they're doing, CPT codes, CPT-based reimbursements, they're advancing well beyond remote health monitoring of physiological parameters like cardiac tele into things that are just very meaningful for reimbursement purposes. For healthcare systems, there's the organization called HIMSS. That's the Healthcare Information and Management Systems Society. And they're also creating a framework, but more about standards on interoperability for a DTX to sit on electronic healthcare records, EHRs. For example, how the DTX would be listed amongst other drugs or medical devices, how will it be prescribed, how will it be successfully billed to insurances, and then eventually dispensed to the patient as well. And then there's data that's collected in the back end. How does that data, that engagement and outcomes data, go back to the patient and the treating team, the physician and treating team, to make more informed clinical decisions? I mean, to achieve this level of integration across all these various stakeholders and to have a seamless patient experience, what's key? Alignment. It's absolutely crucial, Anil.
Yeah, I agree. But it's great to know that there is a significant progress that's been made already in this area. So Ansley, how can we ensure, from the pharma perspective, that all stakeholders within the industry are aligned towards this common goal?
Yes, Anil, a lot of what Shaheen just said. I mean, we ask ourselves that a lot, and the key is going to the patient and to the clinicians and hearing from them and thinking about that from ideation through to the development of these solutions, through to how it's going to be implemented or taken out into real world practice.
Yeah, well said, Ainsley. And there are so many complex reasons that influence the sustainable development of digital therapeutics, from policy to technology accessibility, all those things that Shaheen talked about, ease of use for patient adherence and so forth. So there's so many things that as an industry, we need to be mindful of as we develop these digital therapeutic solutions of the future. But in healthcare, the single most important stakeholder is the patient. And so we appreciate that what Shaheen talked about in terms of the co-development process. And we know that when we're talking about developing treatments, that we need to be in sync and we need to understand what the challenges and barriers are being faced. Many companies obviously therefore have patient engagement units or patient experience units that focus on bringing that patient perspective. At Otsuka, we believe that this is so important that every Otsuka person has a title of being Chief Patient Officer. And so in this way, our myriad of diverse voices in all Otsuka people are included and represent those we serve in our work to develop solutions of the future. And we believe the rest will follow.
Chief Patient Officer, I think that's absolutely awesome. And it's really about patient experience. Austin, we at HCL, we've invested a lot in automation, in technologies like machine learning that predict and prevent the issues from happening. So do you see a similar concept in DTX that would help in continuous learning and improvement of therapies that would enhance the patient experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Anil. And I think it's actually one of the most exciting aspects of digital therapeutics, as Candace and Ainsley and Shaheen have all mentioned. Unlike a pill, we can design our product hand in hand with patients. And importantly, that journey never ends, right? So our products can continuously improve.
Mm-hmm.
That's done both through traditional patient-centric design approaches, such as user research that we talked about, but as well as through software-specific tools like machine learning that you referenced.
That's a really good point, Austin, the machine learning. In fact, it's sad to say, but patients are all too often prisoners of rigid instructions, both in and outside of digital therapeutics. Because we leverage this like solid clinical sciences and engagement sciences with tools like machine learning, we're lifting off those cuffs to a more personalized and empowering therapeutic journey.
Yeah, exactly right, Shaheen. And through that, we're able to gain insights over time at population levels as well as at individual levels and improve therapy at both of those levels. It's been something that we're increasingly investing in and excited about to help ensure our treatments can become even more effective and even more engaging over time.
Great. I think we are almost coming to the end of our time. But before we close, any lasting thoughts that you would like to share with us?
I think that technology and healthcare are inseparable, right? In the future, we will see more and more technology being part of our healthcare towards improved outcomes, which I'm really excited to be part of.
So, Candace here, from my perspective as a chief patient officer, I think that having options and flexibility in treatment is going to be our key to our success, and therefore I predict that digital therapeutics will play a major role in our future.
Yeah, I think listening to the conversations on the panel today really emerged for me as just how complex building a digital therapeutic is, all the various stakeholders along the way, how, all the effort that goes into building a really engaging, efficacious product for a patient. And I think bringing together people who are really passionate about it and having great partners in that endeavor is something that's really important. And I think that's how we will end up building the best digital therapeutics out there.
Yeah, no, I echo all the same comments and just want to say that I'm really proud to be part of this so we could actually develop therapeutics that will be prescribed and used and engaged with by patients. The prediction is always that telehealth is here to stay. That's the new modality. You could have remote virtual visits. I'll venture that digital therapeutics are likewise here to stay, and what will complement, traditional therapeutics, with partnerships and just like we have. Thank you, Anil.
Great. Thank you, everybody. I think it was a great session, and thank you for bringing in your expertise. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll hand it back to Ishita. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for taking out time to be part of this session today and share those insightful predictions. Thank you as well to everyone who joined us today for our iPredict conversations. Now stay tuned to HCL Technologies on all our social media channels for updates on upcoming sessions and events. Take care.